In the summer of 1776, a 23-year-old Quaker woman in Rhode Island collapsed from typhus fever. She lay in bed for hours, unconscious, with her family preparing for her funeral. Then she sat up, opened her eyes, and announced that Jemima Wilkinson was dead. The body, she said, had been reanimated by a divine spirit called the Public Universal Friend, who was neither male nor female, who would never again answer to her birth name, and who had been sent to preach the coming apocalypse. The Public Universal Friend gathered hundreds of followers, walked them into the wilderness of western New York, and founded the town that is now called Penn Yan. The town's name is a compromise between the Pennsylvanian settlers and the Yankee settlers, who could not agree on what to call it. The Public Universal Friend is buried just outside the village. Most people who drive through Penn Yan today have absolutely no idea about any of this. And Penn Yan is not even the strangest town in New York. There is a Long Island village that legally voted itself out of existence in 2017, a town named after a pile of horse skulls left behind by Revolutionary War soldiers, a community in the Catskills that was the world's most prominent tuberculosis hospital and is now a perfectly preserved Victorian time capsule, and a town whose name became the name of a virus that paralyzes children. New York has communities so strange they sound like fiction. They are not. These are 10 of them. Before we get into it, like this video and drop your town and the time you are watching in the comments. I want to see where everyone is tuning in from. And number 3 on this list is one I bet most New Yorkers cannot believe is real. So stick around. Let us go. Number 10. Hicksville. 40 miles east of Manhattan, in the middle of Nassau County, there is a town of about 43,000 people whose name has been making teenagers laugh since the railroad was invented. Hicksville, Long Island. Most of the residents will patiently explain that the town was not named after country bumpkins. It was named after a man. That man was Valentine Hicks, a Quaker abolitionist born in 1782, who served as president of the Long Island Railroad in the 1830s and helped extend the line out through the potato fields of central Nassau County. Hicks was a serious figure. He hid escaped enslaved people in his Jericho farmhouse, which still stands today as a private home. The Underground Railroad passed through this stretch of Long Island, and Hicks was one of its quietest, most effective conductors. When the railroad reached his land in 1837, the new station was named after him. Then the town grew up around the station. The potato fields became suburbs, the farms became strip malls, and the name became a punchline that follows the residents wherever they introduce themselves. There is one more layer worth knowing about. In the 1940s, a young boy named William Joseph Martin Jr. was born in the Bronx and moved with his family to a modest house in Hicksville when he was 4 years old. He grew up in that house. He took piano lessons in the den. His father, a German Jewish refugee who had escaped the Nazis, eventually left the family. The boy stayed in Hicksville. He started playing in bars. He wrote a song called Piano Man. His name was Billy Joel. A town named after an abolitionist is also the place that produced the Piano Man. The name still sounds like an insult. But the people who came out of Hicksville have a habit of making the name sound like a setup for something better. Number 9. Horseheads. In the southern tier of New York, just north of Elmira, there is a village of about 6,000 people whose name has a backstory that most townsfolk only learn when an out-of-state visitor asks. Horseheads. The name is exactly what it sounds like. The story goes back to 1779, during the American Revolution. General John Sullivan was leading a punitive campaign against the Iroquois Confederacy, who had aligned with the British. Sullivan's army marched through what is now central New York, burning over 40 Haudenosaunee villages and destroying their food stores. The expedition was deliberately devastating. It was meant to break Haudenosaunee resistance and clear the way for American settlement. It largely succeeded. But it also nearly destroyed the army itself. By the time Sullivan reached present-day Horseheads, his pack animals were starving. The horses had been ridden too hard for too long with too little food. The army could not continue with them and could not afford to keep feeding them, so Sullivan ordered the animals slaughtered. The horses were killed and butchered on a low rise of ground near the present-day intersection of two state highways. The army moved on. The bones and skulls were left in the open. A few years later, when the local Haudenosaunee people, who had survived the campaign, returned to their ancestral lands, they found the bleached horse skulls scattered across the rise. According to local tradition, they collected the skulls and arranged them in a respectful pile as a marker for the site. When the first European settlers arrived a decade later, the skulls were still there. They called the place Horseheads. The name stuck. The village officially adopted it in 1845. The Horseheads themselves are long gone. The pile is gone. What remains is the name, a small village green and a community that has been quietly explaining its name to visitors for nearly 200 years, a village named for the bones of an active war it cannot unremember. Number 8. Penn Yan. In the Finger Lakes region of central New York, on the northwest shore of Coxsackie Lake, there is a village of about 5,000 people with one of the strangest names and one of the strangest founding stories in the country. The name first. Penn Yan is a contraction. In the 1780s, when the first settlers arrived in this part of the wilderness, they came from two completely different cultural backgrounds. Some were Pennsylvanians, moving north along the Susquehanna River system. Others were Yankees from New England, moving west into what had been Haudenosaunee territory before General Sullivan's campaign. The two groups argued about what to name the new village. The Pennsylvanians wanted a Pennsylvania name. They compromised by smashing the words together. Penn for Pennsylvania, Yan for Yankee. Penn Yan. That story alone would be enough to put the town on this list. But Penn Yan was founded by a religious community that has no parallel in American history. In October of 1776, a 23-year-old woman named Jemima Wilkinson lay in a bed in Cumberland, Rhode Island, dying of typhus fever. She had been raised a Quaker but had recently been expelled from her meeting for attending a non-Quaker church. The fever brought her to the edge of death. According to her own account, her soul left her body and ascended to heaven. The body itself was then reanimated by a new spirit sent by God to preach repentance in the face of the coming apocalypse. When Wilkinson recovered, she announced that Jemima was dead. The being now inhabiting her body was the public universal friend, who was neither male nor female, who would never again answer to a birth name, and who had been charged with a divine mission. The friend cut Jemima's hair short, adopted clothing that combined masculine and feminine elements, and began preaching across Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. The friend gathered hundreds of devoted followers. The Society of Universal Friends advocated celibacy, equality of the sexes, opposition to slavery, and pacifism. The Friends' followers included wealthy landowners who freed their enslaved people and donated their fortunes to the cause. By 1788, the community had decided that the corruption of the East was incompatible with their mission. They sent scouts west into the Genesee country of New York. The scouts found land near Saranac Lake. The Friend and 260 followers walked into the wilderness in 1790 and built a settlement. The public Universal Friend died, or as the Universal Friends put it, left time, on July 1, 1819. The society did not survive long after the Friend's death, but the community endured. The town that grew out of the Friends' settlement is the town that became Penn Yan. The Yates County History Center on Main Street holds the largest collection of the Friends' artifacts in existence. The Friends' portrait, Bible, side saddle, broad-brimmed hat, carriage, and many of the Friends' personal papers are preserved there. Most of the tourists who drive through Penn Yan on a wine country tour have no idea any of this is part of the town's history. A village named after a compromise, founded by a prophet who refused to be male or female, and no one talks about it. Sticking with us so far? Good, because the next three entries are where this list gets genuinely strange. Number 7. Mastic Beach. On the south shore of Long Island, in eastern Suffolk County, there is a community of about 15,000 people that did something in 2017 that no other community in New York had done in living memory. The residents legally voted their own village out of existence. Mastic Beach had been incorporated as a village in 2010. The idea had been to gain more local control over zoning, services, and taxation. The reality was that the village government turned out to be more expensive than the residents could afford. Property taxes rose to cover the costs of village administration. Services did not improve. Roads stayed broken. Infrastructure stayed neglected. After only 7 years of existence as an official village, the residents had had enough. In November of 2016, the dissolution measure went on the ballot. The vote was overwhelming. By a margin of nearly 3-1, residents voted to abolish their own village government. The dissolution took effect on December 31, 2017. As of January 1, 2018, the village of Mastic Beach simply ceased to exist as a legal entity. The land returned to being an unincorporated hamlet within the town of Brookhaven, governed by Brookhaven's officials and serviced by Brookhaven's departments. The story is not just bureaucratic. It is the visible record of a community that ran an experiment in self-government and decided, by direct democratic vote, that the experiment had failed. There are not many examples of this in modern American politics. Most communities that incorporate stay incorporated. Most local governments, once established, defend their existence vigorously. Mastic Beach voted to undo itself And then it did. The roads are still there. The houses are still there. The people are still there. The village government is not. A community that legally voted itself out of existence and then went back to being a hamlet. Number 6. Roscoe. In the western Catskill Mountains, about 3 hours northwest of New York City, there is a village of roughly 500 people that has built its entire identity around catching fish. Roscoe, New York. Population 500. Official nickname, Trout Town, USA. The nickname is not a marketing gimmick. It is a description of what the town actually is. Roscoe sits at the confluence of the Beaver Kill and the Willowmoke Creek, two of the most legendary trout streams in the United States. Every April 1st, the town holds an official ceremony to mark the opening of trout season, with the local Roscoe Rockland Rotary Club leading a parade through downtown and a ceremonial first cast in the river. The streets are decorated with banners depicting fishing flies. The restaurants serve trout dinners. The bookstore sells fly fishing manuals. Most people who live in Roscoe fish. Most of the people who visit Roscoe fish. The economy depends on fishing. The culture depends on fishing. The town's calendar is structured around the fishing seasons. This obsession has a specific historical origin. In the late 1800s, a New York stockbroker named Theodore Gordon was diagnosed with tuberculosis. The treatment of the era was to leave the city and live in the mountains, where the cold, dry air was believed to help the lungs. Gordon settled near Roscoe and devoted his remaining years to fly fishing. He invented new patterns of artificial flies. He published articles in fishing journals. He developed the techniques that came to be known as the American School of Dry Fly Fishing, distinct from the British tradition. When Gordon died in 1915, he was already a legendary figure in American sport fishing. His patterns are still tied today. His grave at the Maplewood Cemetery in Livingston Manor draws pilgrimages from anglers around the world. The Catskill Fly Fishing Center and Museum, just outside Roscoe, holds his original tackle and his personal correspondence. A man who fled the city to die of tuberculosis became the founding figure of American fly fishing, and the town where he fished is now a fishing destination so dedicated that the streets are named after the people who tied his flies. A village whose entire economy is built on a sport invented by a man with a fatal lung disease. Number 5. Yaphank. In central Suffolk County, on Long Island, there is a hamlet of about 6,000 people called Yaphank. The name comes from the Unkichog Algonquian word Yaphank, meaning bank of a river. The river is the Carmen's River. The bank is where the community was first settled. For most of the 19th century, Yaphank was a quiet rural community of farms, mills, and a few hundred residents. In the 1930s, Yaphank became the most prominent Nazi community in the United States. The German-American Bund, founded in 1936, was a pro-Nazi organization that worked to spread Hitler's ideology among German Americans. The Bund established a network of summer camps across the country, the largest of which was Camp Siegfried, opened on a 40-acre property in Yaphank in 1935. The camp hosted thousands of visitors during peak summers. There were swastika flags, there were uniformed marches, there were Nazi salutes. The streets within the surrounding Bund-controlled subdivision, called German Gardens, were renamed Adolf Hitler Strasse, Goering Strasse, and Goebbels-Strasse. A 1937 train called the Siegfried Special carried hundreds of Bund members from Manhattan to Yaphank every weekend. For rallies, New York newspapers covered the events with a mixture of alarm and journalistic detachment. Federal investigators began surveilling the camp. By the time the United States entered the war in 1941, the Bund had been effectively dismantled by Department of Justice prosecutions. Camp Siegfried closed. The streets were renamed. The community attempted to move on. What makes Yaphank uniquely strange is what happened after. The German-American Settlement League, the original Bund-affiliated entity that owned the German Gardens subdivision, continued to exist. Its bylaws required that homes be sold only to people of German descent. That restriction remained legally enforced until 2017, when a Justice Department settlement forced the League to remove the racial covenant. 2017. Not 1950. 2017. The hamlet today is quiet, modest, and apparently unremarkable. Most of the houses are ordinary suburban homes. The residents are ordinary suburban families. But the records of what this community was, the photographs of the rallies, the newspaper coverage of the Siegfried Special, are still accessible to anyone who knows where to look. A Long Island town that was the headquarters of American Nazism and whose original Bund covenant survived until the year the iPhone X was released. If you have made it this far, the next 4 entries are the ones I think about most. Number 3 has a fact that almost nobody outside the town knows. Number 4. North Pole. In the Adirondack Mountains on the side of Whiteface Mountain near Wilmington, New York, there is a small commercial area that claims to be the actual North Pole. Santa Claus lives there. His workshop operates there. The reindeer are stabled there. And the entire premise has been maintained, with deadpan seriousness, for over 75 years. The town is called North Pole. The attraction at its center is called Santa's Workshop. It opened on July 1st, 1949, making it one of the oldest theme parks in the United States. It opened before Disneyland by 6 years. The man behind it was an interior designer named Julian Rice, who had been telling his daughter bedtime stories about Santa. After one of those stories, his daughter asked whether they could visit Santa. Rice could not get the question out of his head. He partnered with an architect named Arto Monaco, an Adirondacks resident with a background in animation at Disney and Universal Studios, and the two of them designed a Christmas-themed village in the woods. They built it on the side of Whiteface. They got real reindeer. They hired a man with a white beard to live there in a Santa suit and never break character. The park opened in 1949 and was an immediate success. Bus tours from New York City brought thousands of children. Life magazine photographed it. The post office gave it the official designation of North Pole, New York. Letters addressed to Santa Claus at the North Pole began to be routed there. They have been routed there ever since. The park is still open. It still has reindeer. The Santa who works there is, by all reports, one of the most committed performers in the country. He responds to questions about flight technology, sleigh capacity, naughty list logistics, and the international time zone implications of his Christmas Eve schedule with the patience of a saint and the consistency of a sworn oath. In the center of the village, there is an attraction called Frosty's Beard. It is a large pole of ice that has been kept frozen continuously since the park opened in 1949. The story is that the ice came from Frosty the Snowman himself and has never melted. The park has reinforced this story, with refrigeration equipment running for 76 straight years. As of 2026, the ice is still there. A man who could not answer his daughter's question built a Christmas village in the woods, and 76 years later, the ice is never thawed. Number 3. Coxsackie. About 30 minutes south of Albany, on the west bank of the Hudson River, there is a village of about 3,000 people called Coxsackie. The name comes from the Mohican word kakais, meaning hoot of the owl or possibly outlet of the geese. Linguists are not certain which. What linguists are certain about is that Coxsackie is the only village in New York that gave its name to a worldwide medical condition. In 1947, 2 children in Coxsackie were diagnosed with what doctors initially thought was a mild case of polio. Researchers at the Yale University Department of Bacteriology were sent stool samples for analysis. The samples revealed a previously unknown family of viruses. The viruses were not polio, they were related to polio but distinct from it. They caused a range of illnesses, including hand, foot, and mouth disease, myocarditis, meningitis, and a flu-like condition that could occasionally cause paralysis. The researchers named the virus family after the town where the samples had originated. They became Coxsackie viruses. Today, Coxsackie viruses are studied in medical schools around the world. Children get infected with them every year. The virus appears in textbooks, in research papers, in medical journals, in the World Health Organization databases. And every time a doctor diagnoses a patient with a Coxsackie virus infection, they are invoking the name of a small village on the Hudson River that almost nobody outside New York has heard of. The village itself is unremarkable in most respects. It has a downtown of 19th century buildings, a waterfront on the Hudson, and a population that has stayed relatively stable for decades. The state prison, Coxsackie Correctional Facility, is the largest local employer. The village government does not particularly market its connection to the virus. Most residents do not bring it up unless asked. But the name is everywhere in medicine. The virus does not care that almost nobody in the world has heard of Coxsackie, New York. It carries the name forward into every medical record, every laboratory result, every hospital admission for hand, foot, and mouth disease. A child in Tokyo gets sick. A doctor in Paris reads the chart. They both say the word Coxsackie. Neither of them has ever been there. A village so small you can drive through it in 30 seconds, named a virus that infects millions of people every year. Number 2. Chittenango. About 20 miles east of Syracuse, in central New York, there is a village of about 5,000 people called Chittenango. The name comes from a Haudenosaunee word meaning where waters part. For most of its history, Chittenango was an ordinary upstate New York town with a canal, a few small factories, and a quiet downtown. In 1976, the village decided to commit fully to being the birthplace of a children's book. The book is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Its author, Lyman Frank Baum, was born in Chittenango on May 15, 1856. Baum spent only the first 12 years of his life there before his family moved to Syracuse, and he never lived in Chittenango again as an adult. But the village has decided to claim him with everything it has. The sidewalks in downtown Chittenango are made of yellow bricks, real yellow bricks, installed in 1976 and maintained ever since. They run along the main commercial street, the same color as the road in the book that leads Dorothy to the Emerald City. The local businesses have names like Auntie M's Restaurant and Munchkin Variety Store. The annual Ozstravaganza Festival, held every June, draws thousands of visitors who dress as characters from the book and the movie. Actors from the 1930 MGM film, including some of the original Munchkins, used to make appearances at the festival when they were still alive. The festival has been running since 1978. The All Things Oz Museum on Genesee Street holds one of the largest collections of Wizard of Oz memorabilia outside of California. It includes original copies of the books, costumes from various film and stage productions, and a collection of Baum family artifacts. The yellow brick road runs directly past it. What makes Chittenango distinctly weird is the level of commitment. Most towns associated with famous authors have a sign, a plaque, maybe a small museum. Chittenango paved its sidewalks yellow, renamed its businesses, built an entire annual festival, designed its tourist identity around a book that was published in 1900, and a movie made in 1939. It works. Tourists come. The village earns income from the Oz pilgrims. Baum is remembered. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz remains in print. And every June, a small village in central New York fills up with people in blue gingham dresses and ruby slippers, walking on real yellow bricks, past a museum that holds a piece of the original Tin Man. A village built its entire identity around a book a 12-year-old child happened to be born in, and somehow, it is one of the most committed tourism strategies in the state. And number 1, Saranac Lake. In the central Adirondack Mountains, surrounded by lakes and forest, there is a village of about 5,000 people called Saranac Lake. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary Adirondack resort community. Quaint downtown, lake views, outdoor recreation, tourist shops. Most of the buildings appear to be Victorian, with elaborate woodwork, gables, and unusually large porches. The porches are the clue. Saranac Lake was for over half a century the most important tuberculosis treatment center in the United States. Beginning in 1873, a young doctor named Edward Livingston Trudeau, who had himself contracted tuberculosis and was sent to the Adirondacks to die, discovered something unexpected. His symptoms improved in the cold mountain air. He recovered. He moved to Saranac Lake permanently. He decided to dedicate his life to studying the disease that should have killed him. In 1885, Trudeau opened the Adirondack Cottage Sanatorium, the first tuberculosis treatment facility in the United States. The theory was that the cold, dry, high-altitude air would help patients heal. The architecture was specifically designed to maximize exposure to that air. Every cottage and main building had screened porches where patients slept outdoors year-round, including in winter, when temperatures regularly dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Patients arrived by the trainload. They came from every social class. They came from Manhattan, Boston, Paris, London. They were poor laborers and rich industrialists. They were artists, writers, soldiers, teachers, children. They were rich enough to afford a private cure cottage, or poor enough to be placed in the charity ward. Robert Louis Stevenson, the author of Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, came to Saranac Lake in 1887 and lived for several months in a cure cottage on what is now Stevenson Lane. He wrote portions of The Master of Ballantrae while sleeping on a screened porch in the Adirondack cold. The cottage still stands. It is now a museum. Albert Einstein summered in Saranac Lake during the 1940s. The composer Bela Bartok died there in 1945 in a cure cottage on Riverside Drive. The list of writers, artists, and intellectuals who passed through Saranac Lake during the cure era reads like a who's who of early 20th century culture. Many of them died there. Many of them recovered. All of them slept on porches in the cold. The discovery of streptomycin in 1943 made the entire treatment model obsolete almost overnight. Tuberculosis became curable with antibiotics. The sanatoriums emptied. Trudeau's institution wound down. The cure cottages were converted into private homes. The patients went home or stayed and joined the local community. What remains in Saranac Lake is one of the most distinctive Victorian streetscapes in the United States, with house after house featuring elaborate porches designed not for summer entertaining, but for sleeping outdoors in the worst weather imaginable. The Trudeau Institute, the descendant of the original sanatorium, is now one of the country's premier biomedical research facilities, still studying infectious disease. The Saranac Laboratory, the first laboratory in America dedicated to tuberculosis research, has been restored as a museum. You can walk through Saranac Lake today and pass dozens of cure cottages, almost all of which are unmarked. The locals know which is which. Visitors do not. The town looks beautiful and strange at the same time, like a Victorian resort that decided to add airflow to every architectural detail. Because that is exactly what it did. The disease that built Saranac Lake is gone. The architecture is permanent. A village that was, for over 50 years, the place where the dying came to live, and the place where some of them learned to breathe again. That is New York, not Manhattan, not Brooklyn, not the version that fits on a postcard. The other New York, the state with a village named after a body part, a hamlet that voted itself out of existence, a Nazi summer camp that no one wants to remember, a town built around a children's book, and a community whose entire architecture was designed for people who were trying not to die. These places are all real. They are still standing, and almost nobody who lives in New York City has ever heard of any of them. If you found this video as strange as I did, subscribing takes 1 second, and it helps us keep making these. Thanks for watching.